The upscale restaurant gleamed beneath brilliant chandeliers, every crystal catching the light in tiny rainbow fragments that danced across the polished marble floors. Waiters moved with graceful efficiency, their trays balanced with champagne flutes, plates of delicately arranged hors d'oeuvres, and bowls of steaming soup. The gentle clinking of silverware and glasses formed the soundtrack of refinement. From the corner, a string quartet tuned their instruments, their soft notes weaving into the air like the promise of elegance. Among the sea of satin gowns, tailored tuxedos, and air heavy with expensive perfume, one figure stood out, not because of extravagance, but because of simplicity. A man in a worn button-down shirt sat quietly at a small table near the back. His clothes were neat, but undeniably plain, the kind of outfit that marked him as someone who had worked with his hands for years. He pulled a crumpled $50 bill from his wallet and placed it gently on the table, smoothing its wrinkled surface with callous fingers. Laughter erupted almost instantly. $50! Someone scoffed from across the room. That's barely enough to cover the napkins here. Nearby customers covered their mouths in amusement, some not even bothering to hide their smirks. A few had already lifted their phones, eager to capture the scene for social media. The perfect bit of cruel entertainment. The waiter standing at the table shook his head, looking at the bill as though it carried the stench of poverty. Beside the man sat a little girl, no more than 7 years old. She tugged softly at his hand, her big brown eyes fixed on him. "Daddy, I'm okay," she whispered, sensing his embarrassment before he said a word. The man's hand tightened around his old keychain, a cluster of worn metal pieces that jingled faintly in his pocket. His eyes remained calm and steady, refusing to meet the mocking stares around him. He had been laughed at before. Humiliation was not unfamiliar territory. But tonight was supposed to be different, for her. Across the room, at a glittering VIP table where the city's elite had gathered, a young woman in a red satin dress slowly rose to her feet. The movement was subtle, but in a room where status dictated attention, it was enough to silence the laughter for a brief moment. Hours earlier, in a small apartment miles away from this glittering world, David Cole had been adjusting his tie in the bathroom mirror. He tugged it for the third time, unsure if it was supposed to sit that high or that tight. His reflection told the story of a man who had worked his entire adult life. Broad shoulders from hauling boxes, hands rough from years of driving delivery trucks and repairing engines. At 35, his face bore lines that came not from luxury, but from responsibility. He had promised his daughter something special tonight. "Daddy, are you ready?" Ella's voice came from the doorway, high-pitched and brimming with excitement. She bounced into the room, clutching a tiny backpack almost as big as her. Inside, carefully folded, was her most treasured possession, a crayon drawing she had worked on for weeks. Across the top in big, colorful letters, it read, "Daddy takes me to see dreams come true." David forced a smile, though his heart ached at her innocence. "Almost sweetheart," he said softly, adjusting his tie again. He checked his wallet one last time. The old, wrinkled $50 bill was there, his only real spare cash. He had saved it carefully from 2 weeks of extra overtime shifts, eating instant noodles for dinner, and skipping his usual morning coffee runs. That single bill wasn't just money. It was time, sweat, sacrifice. It was hope folded into paper. Ella had been talking about the classical music concert at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel for months. Her music teacher at school had mentioned it, and while most of her classmates' parents could buy tickets without hesitation, for David it was a mountain to climb. But he had climbed it anyway, for her. "Daddy," Ella said again, her small hand sliding into his, "will there really be people in fancy clothes?" "Yes, baby," David replied, kneeling to meet her gaze. "But remember this," he touched her chin gently. "It's not the clothes that make someone special. It's what's in their heart." The Grand Metropolitan's lobby was a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings higher than any building David had ever stepped into. The marble floors gleamed like water under lights, and guests in gowns and tuxedos moved with the grace of royalty. To Ella, it was as if a fairy tale had come alive. At the reception desk, David approached with Ella's hand firmly in his. The hostess, a young woman with flawless makeup and a smile practiced in the mirror, glanced at them. Her smile faltered just slightly as her eyes swept over David's shirt and Ella's modest dress. "We're here for the classical music evening," David said politely, reaching for his wallet. "Of course," she replied, her voice carrying that subtle shift in tone, reserved for people who didn't belong. "That will be $45 for the dinner and show." David unfolded the $50 bill carefully, smoothing its creases. The hostess stared at it longer than necessary, her manicured fingers hesitating as if the bill itself were tainted. "We don't usually see guests paying with street market currency," she said, the last words dripping with disdain. A chuckle echoed from nearby. David felt Ella's hand tighten in his. "Money is money," David said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "As long as it's real." The hostess sighed, processed the payment reluctantly, and handed back his $5 in change. She pointed them toward the dining room, her posture rigid as though she wanted them gone. As David and Ella walked away, he could hear whispers trailing behind them. "Did you see that bill? Looked like it came from a garage sale." Some people just don't know their place. Ella tugged his shirt. "Daddy, I'm hungry." He gave her hand a squeeze. "Let's get you something to eat, princess." The keys in his pocket jingled faintly, their sound usually comforting but tonight sharp and out of place, as though announcing their intrusion into a world that didn't want them. The dining room was a painting of elegance. Long tables draped in linen stretched across the hall, adorned with sparkling glassware and silver cutlery that caught the light like jewels. Guests floated from table to table, their laughter effortless, their movements rehearsed. Women in gowns shimmered like living sculptures. Men in suits spoke in confident tones that carried no trace of worry about rent bills or overtime shifts. David found 2 seats at a small table near the back, far from the stage where a string quartet prepared their instruments. For Ella, though, it was still magic. Her eyes glowed as she took it all in, pulling her crayon drawing for her backpack. "See," she whispered, holding it up for him. "I drew you bringing me to a place where dreams come true." David's chest tightened. He smiled, though the weight in his heart grew heavier. "You're right, sweetheart. It is magical." A server approached, his tone polite but clipped. "Good evening. Can I start you with some appetizers? We have a lovely selection of—" "Just something simple for my daughter, please," David interrupted gently. "Maybe some bread and soup." The server's smile faltered. "Of course," he said, though his tone cooled noticeably. When David reached again for his wallet and handed over the same crumpled bill to pay in advance, the server hesitated. He lifted the bill for others nearby to see. "You're paying with this?" he asked loudly, drawing attention. "Your only bill, sir." Heads turned. Conversations paused. The moment stretched, heavy with ridicule waiting to burst. The server's words rang across the tables like a cruel bell. An elderly businessman at the next table leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Did you save up all week just to sit here, friend?" he sneered. Laughter rippled outward. Phones lifted higher, cameras flashed, and suddenly the quiet dignity of one man and his daughter became the room's entertainment. David felt the heat rise in his chest, but he did not look at them. He poured Ella a simple glass of water from the table pitcher. Around them, champagne fizz in crystal flutes, golden and extravagant. He pushed the glass toward her with steady hands. "Sometimes," he whispered to her, "the simplest things are the most precious." But the humiliation was not finished. The evening's master of ceremonies, dressed in a tuxedo sharp enough to cut, had noticed a commotion. With a theatrical flourish, he lifted his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the hall, "it appears we have someone here tonight who thinks $50 can buy a taste of the good life." The crowd erupted. Applause, whistles, cruel laughter, phones recording, ready to be shared across feeds and timelines by morning. Ella shrank in her chair, her face turning crimson. She clutched the hem of her dress, fighting tears. The evening she had dreamed of for months was unraveling into humiliation. David's hand moved to his pocket. The familiar jingle of his keychain, the sound of every lock to every home they had known, every place he had tried to keep safe, echoed softly. He pulled it out and pressed it into Ella's palm. "Here, baby. Hold these for Daddy." The soft jingle steadied her. She clutched the keys, holding on to the sound of home. "And what's next?" the MC continued, basking in his own cruelty. "Will our $50 friend try to tip the musicians with spare change?" Laughter swelled again. The server smirked. The managers looked away. The guests leaned forward, feeding off the spectacle. The little girl's tears finally spilled, sliding down her cheeks. David sat motionless, calm, stone. Inside, however, he was already calculating how quickly he could leave, how to salvage her dignity even as the world mocked them. But just as the laughter reached its peak, the noise began to die. Murmurs spread. Heads turned toward the front of the room, toward the gleaming VIP section. A young woman in a red satin dress was standing. Sophia Lane was no ordinary guest. At 26, she carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that made even the wealthy hesitate. Her family's name was on skyscrapers, foundations, and the very gala program everyone had in their hands. When she moved, the room obeyed. She didn't speak at first. She simply walked, each step deliberate, her heels clicking against the marble floor in rhythm with the string quartet's tuning notes. The room held its breath. She reached David and Ella's table. The server still held the crumpled $50 bill like evidence of a crime. Sophia extended her hand. "May I see that, please?" The server faltered, confused, but quickly handed it over. Who could refuse Sophia Lane? She smoothed the bill between her fingers, staring at it with an intensity that silenced even the boldest guests. Her hands trembled slightly. Finally, she looked up. "This bill," she whispered, her voice carrying to the hushed room. "I know this bill." Confusion rippled. Whisper spread. Sophia's voice grew stronger. 10 years ago, my father survived a construction accident. A scaffolding collapsed. He was trapped, and the man who pulled him out, who saved his life, left this very $50 bill in his hand. He told my father it was good luck and vanished before he could be thanked. Gasps filled the air. Cameras clicked frantically. Sophia turned, her eyes locking onto David. "That man," she said, her voice breaking, "was you?" Chaos erupted. The room transformed instantly. Phones zoomed in. Flashes ignited. What had been a spectacle of humiliation was now history unfolding. David's calm face betrayed no surprise. "I don't remember why I gave it to him," he said quietly. "I only know when someone needs help, you get what you have." The simplicity of his words struck the room like a hammer. What had been laughter moments ago now turned into shame. Sophia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You disappeared that day. But my father never forgot. He kept this bill safe, called it a second chance. He even had a photograph taken with it in the hospital." From her purse, she pulled out a small, weathered photograph in a clear sleeve. Gasps spread again. The image showed an older man in a hospital bed, smiling weakly while holding up the exact same crumpled $50 bill. "This is proof," Sophia said firmly. "This bill saved my father's life. And tonight, you've all mocked it." The crowd squirmed. The MC's face had gone pale. Ella, clutching her father's keys, whispered softly, "Daddy, your picture's going to be more beautiful than my drawing." Her innocence shattered whatever pride remained in the mocking guests. Many lowered their eyes. Some wiped tears they hadn't expected to shed. But not everyone was convinced. "This is ridiculous." A donor in a tailored suit shot to his feet, his face flushed. "One old bill doesn't prove anything. Are we supposed to believe this maintenance worker is some kind of hero because of a story?" Murmurs of agreement rippled among a handful of other wealthy guests. They didn't want the narrative shifted. Sophia met his gaze coolly. "You want proof?" She held the photograph higher. "The serial number on this bill matches. My father had it verified by the bank." The donor fell silent, his bravado collapsing under the weight of undeniable truth. Sophia turned on the MC, her eyes flashing. "You turned this man's sacrifice into a joke. You made a hero into entertainment." The MC's microphone slipped slightly in his grip. The entire world was watching now, cameras everywhere. Sophia faced the crowd. "The Lane Foundation will start a new initiative tonight. with this $50 bill as the founding contribution, to prove that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple into something greater. She gently placed the bill beside Ella's crayon drawing on the table. Together they looked oddly perfect. A child's dream and a man's sacrifice. The room broke into applause. Not mocking, not polite, but genuine. David finally stood, Ella's hand in his. "I don't need my money to become something bigger than it is," he said softly. "I just hope it's enough." Ella suddenly climbed onto her chair, holding up her drawing. "Miss Sophia," she called in her clear child voice, "I drew Daddy in the right place. Is my picture true now?" The room froze. Tears fell freely now, the innocence of a child cutting through every wall pride. Sophia knelt, her satin pooling around her. "Your picture was always true, sweetheart. Sometimes it just takes adults a little longer to see what children already know." The applause swelled, thunderous and real. By the end of the night, Sophia placed the bill and Ella's drawing in an elegant wooden frame. "This will hang in the Lane Foundation lobby," she announced. "So everyone remembers that real wealth isn't measured by what you spend, but by what you give." Ella hugged her father tightly, her little voice whispering, "Daddy, my dreams really did come true." And as David carried her out of the restaurant, every guest who had once mocked him now stood in silent respect. The story would not end here. It would travel, carried on phones, screens, and whispers, teaching strangers around the world the value of dignity, sacrifice, and the power of a single $50 bill.